Preserving the planet. The Micro Effect. www.themicroeffect.com.
You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
There was a mighty nation, blessed above all of creation. It was a rare and precious pearl, conceived in faith and liberty, home of the brave, land of the free. It was the envy of the world. But this shining city on a hill has turned from the Creator's will and let evil take control. Now the reckless men who lead them want to strip away their freedom and to steal their very soul. Now it's smoke and mirrors, switching bait, criticize and confiscate and let the guilty walk away. In this once righteous, godly nation, in the halls of education, they forbid a child to pray. They say we need to spread the wealth. They pretend to guard the health of the feeble and the poor, while the hand they hold behind their backs confuses and conceals the fact that the wolf is at the door. There's an unseen hand that pulls.
Well, welcome to Connecting the Dots. It's Tuesday morning, July 10th, and we have a really, really excellent guest on today. We have Dr. Charles Lee. Dr. Lee is he was born in China. He is a naturalized American citizen, but he spent 3 years in a Chinese prison as a political prisoner for his attempts to stand up for and protect the rights of individuals who were part of the Falun Gong network in China. And Dr. Lee is someone who Americans need to listen to, because he warns about what is currently going on in China, what has continued to go on in China, and his message, I think, is extremely important, because he realizes, like many of us in America do, that communism is not going away on its own accord. It will only go away if we actively fight against it. And he is a tremendous freedom fighter in the United States. He is doing some terrific programs, and I just want to welcome Dr. Lee to our program. Dr. Lee, are you on the call?
Yes, I am. Thank you. Good morning, Ms. Happel.
Well, thank you. I would like to have you kind of give our listeners a little bit of your background, how you were born and raised in China, and how you ended up becoming a U.S. citizen.
I was born in China like in 1955, and immediately after I was born, the Cultural Revolution started. So when I was like even 9 years old, I got involved in the kind of political turmoil. That was like when I was very young. Then when I was 10, the Cultural Revolution ended, and the Communist Party started so-called opening up. But when we went to the college, everything was the same. The Communist Party still want people to be brainwashed and all those things. And then until 1989, and when people demand more rights and want the Communist Party to stop the corruptions, then those students were cracked down, were killed. And we heard like more than 10,000 were killed. So that was the time we were like in desperation that we had to get out of the country. Was like the ending of the country, the nation. So that's why I did a lot of things, try my best to get out of China. So I arrived in this country. in 1991 started my study in this country, and then I went to Harvard Medical School doing research works, and over there I applied for green card. So I believe that the freedom in this country is so treasurable. So I want to stay here and enjoy the freedom. In the meantime, I will do whatever is needed for people in China. So, but along the way, in 1997, I got to know this program, this ancient meditation program called the Falun Gong, also called the Falun Dafa. It's based on the principles of truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. It has 5 sets of exercises. So I started to learn that, and all of a sudden, a lot of things had changed, because I know what's the best thing for a human life. So I started practice. However, in China, this program has had spread like a wildfire, because it has such a tremendous, powerful effect on people's health and their other well-being. So it started in 1992 in China, but it's at the end of 1998. The government itself estimated there was 70 million to 100 million people practicing in China. So it's way past the members of the Communist Party. So since the Communist Party has been using violence and lies to control the society, a group of people who practice truthfulness, compassion, forbearance in China is really a big challenge to the Communist Party, because ordinary people will see the contrast between these two groups of people. So the Communist Party couldn't take it, so they started persecution on Falun Gong in 1999. So we knew what's going on, and we knew we didn't have any political agenda. We just want to be a good person and to have a good health, those kind of things. So I tried to go back to help several times. I was detained, and then finally I was arrested and put in prison for 3 years. So that's the brief introduction for my past. So I came out of the prison in 2006, and ever since I started another journey to let people know what's going on in China.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that you haven't been back to China physically since 2006, since you got out of prison. Am I correct on that, or have you been back since then?
No, I couldn't go back, and also even if I did, I might be in big trouble, because my case was so publicized. So I'm a person like this. People will know, so that's why they don't want me to go back. So that's one of the ways they always do with political dissidents. People like me or anybody who are so much different from what they want. So they want you to be silent, sort of. So to don't have any effect in China. But we have been doing these things ever since 1999 to reveal the truth, and also. In 2004, there was a book published. It's called 9 Commentaries on Communist Party. Since that book was published, there was a movement started in China, which is called Quitting the Communist Party, and its affiliated organizations. Right now, in March of this year, we have 300 million people in China who have done that. So it's a big movement, and we believe this will end the Communist Party, and also will help the people in other countries as well, like the people in this country.
Well, I think it's important for our listeners to realize, I think a lot of Americans are somewhat deceived with the notion that communism has changed completely in China, and it's become this kind of benign political system that nobody worries too much about or anything like that anymore. And the fact is communism is still very much in control of the country of China and the whole political process.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think there's quite a need for people to read the books like I just mentioned, the 9 commentaries on Communist Party, because the Communist Party from its very beginning in Europe, it's called itself as a sector. It has a lot of characteristics, as a sector. In the book, it has listed the 9 inherited traits of the Communist Party, like the evil, like they put on the Karl Marx, the Leninism, that kind of thing, and force people to give up their private properties, and they cheat all the time. That's the second inherited trait. Like they always trying to deceive people. Then they have it's stirring up the scums of the society. They want to use those people who don't have any moral bottom line. Those people, they can do anything, help the communism to get the power. They use violence. They use the sort of espionage. They use espionage all the time. And they also have ways to solve dissensions among their enemies, so-called enemies. They want to use different group of people to fight against each other, so they can benefit from that kind of things. And also they have a lot of ways to control people. They kill. That's they kill like a huge amount of people in human history. Never happened like in human history. It's more than 100 millions of people worldwide. But in China alone, we had a very conservative number. It's like 80 million people were either killed or starved to death by the Communist Party in the last 70 years. So it's the inherited traits, like their genes, born from naturally born. So since this is the way they control people, this is the way they get the power, and this is the way they develop their base. So they can never change, because this is like the nature. So if you look in China right now, there's sort of trade dispute or trade war between the United States and America. Then if you look at the history, the Communist Party in China never complied to any rules or regulations. Even if they did, they want to break that later on, because that's like their strategy. They might be like complying to some rules or regulations temporarily, but later on they will just still break it. So they're the rule breaker. So it's always the case. It never change. So that's we have to realize, because a lot of people invest in China, they have lost their money, and they couldn't get any way to get the money back, because the legal system in China is totally controlled by the Communist Party. It is only a sort of a tool for them to maintain their power. So it is like a truth people need to realize, that Communist Party in China never change. They can only get worse and worse. Right now they have accumulated a lot of wealth in their hands, but the way they got those wealth is very unethical. So we need to really look into that, how they got this money. Like they disregard the environmental issues. They never pay any attention to the pollution. So if you go to China, all the air is heavily polluted, and all the water is polluted, and they even polluted the underground water. So if you look at the essence of the way they do things, then you will realize that this is not a normal government or normal political party. It is really a sector, as they themselves called them in the very beginning, and we call that an evil sector. It's really something people need to realize, because they have so much money, and they develop their military. They're trying to infiltrate all the Western countries. All those things is very dangerous for people, living in this country.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know that we see this happening all over the world, and that everybody at least believed for a while that communism was dead, and that it was on the decline, and that free market capitalism was on the increase. And in fact, I think an awful lot of people are beginning to realize that communism kind of went underground after the Cold War ended, and it didn't really change anything. It actually is in more countries today than it was in 1990, 1989 with the fall of the Berlin Wall. So I think a lot of people are starting to realize that communism, wherever it gets itself in place, it will change the dynamic of the country and the economy, and it's never for the better. It's always for the worse.
That's right. The progress they've made is tremendous in terms of infiltrating all the other countries and controlling other countries in different ways, including like buying off all the the most of the politicians they could. And we have heard stories in Australia and New Zealand. Also, we have heard a lot of stories in this country. As a matter of fact, back in 2008, they have summoned a lot of mafia members to attack Falun Gong practitioners in Boston, New York. And there was like tens of thousands of those people turned out to beat up Falun Gong practitioners. And, that was sort of a fifth column, we call them, because this is a heavy infiltration in this country, because if you recall the 9/11 events, like 20 or something terrorist people attack the Twin Towers. But if you imagine that the Communist Party, they can summon tens of thousands people in this country and do whatever they want, then that will cause much bigger disaster. So this is one of the things they do. But they also infiltrate, stealing the trade secrets, the technologies from the Western countries. So it's like they win over in all different fields. This is the reality, so we need to face.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know I've got a quote here, and people in our own country, some of the wealthiest people in our own country, have been promoting globalism, and their vision of globalism is some sort of a Marxist, communist, socialist ideology. But I've got a quote here from David Rockefeller. It was his report from a China traveler, and it was in August 10th of 1973 in the New York Times. This was reported. This was before we normalized relations with China. This was before Nixon went over to China to normalize relations with the mainland Chinese. And his quote is, quote, "One is impressed immediately by the sense of national harmony. Whatever the price of the Chinese Revolution, it has obviously succeeded in fostering high morale and community purpose. General social and economic progress is no less impressive. The enormous social advances in China have benefited greatly from the singleness of ideology and purpose. The social experiment in China under Chairman Mao's leadership is one of the most important and successful in history," unquote. That is David Rockefeller, and incidentally, I don't know if a lot of people know this, but Henry Kissinger was the personal secretary of Nelson Rockefeller, David Rockefeller's brother. And there's so many connections at the upper level of the social structure in the United States that is trying to promote the same kind of thing that you're trying to flee, and the people in China are trying to get rid of. And this is one of the things that just worries me and a lot of other people, is that we've got forces in our own country, very powerful forces, who are trying to promote this sort of a communist or certainly a Marxist system. You live there. You understand exactly how awful that system is. I just want you to reaffirm to our listeners just how serious it is to give up the liberty that we have in this country. I mean, we are so lucky, and most people don't realize just exactly how lucky we are.
Yes, as I said, I treasure this freedom in this country very much, and I applied this naturalization in 2002. However, they actually, you mentioned that this is a big subject because there's another book published the last year. It's called The Ultimate Goal of Communism. It has laid out the roadmap of communism. That actually started from Europe, and then there's a violent way through former Soviet Union, and then to China. And another way is sort of non-violence in the beginning, like infiltration. In Western countries, they have started Fabianism, that kind of things. There are a lot of left-wing organizations. Actually, they came from the communism in essence. And if you look back in history, the way why the communists could win in China, they got a lot of help from these people in Western countries. During the Civil War in China in 1947, George Marshall, from United States, they helped the Communist Party in a way that they stopped the nationalist government to wipe out the Communist Party's armies. And that's one of the very sad incidents in China because, China fell into the communist hands, and then, tens of millions of people suffered and died. Then you just mentioned that Nixon and Kissinger, they went to China when China was in the middle of the Cultural Revolution. And then, there was like the Communist Party couldn't support itself at that time, but the United States came to help. They established the relation with the Communist China and then helped them into the United Nations. And that's another, sad event for Chinese people and also for the world as well. And then in 1989, only 1 month after the crackdown on Tiananmen Square, the president of the United States sent some kind of secret delegates to China and sort of soothing them up, say that you don't need to be worried because we're going to continue the relation with you. We're going to continue trade wars with you. So that was kind of things from the Western countries helping the communism in China. But back in Western countries, we have seen all these left-wing communist style groups and things, get into power, get controlling everything, like education, government, you name it, the economy. And also for the globalization itself is sort of kind of schemed by the communist elements in this world. They want to control the entire world. So when they, actually they were from, very same place from the Communist Party. So that's why they like the Communist Party's ideas to control people and get the freedom away from people. So that's how they use this globalization. Because if you look back, the Chinese Communist Party got a lot of wealth from this process, and they suddenly become super rich. So that's the process. They want to help the Communist Party in China, and then help themselves get a hold of power over the world. So that's what we have been seeing. And right now, they kind of reverse of this process because the Trump administration is trying to reverse this globalization, because globalization is only benefits those big companies, those big groups of people that they have a lot of power and money in their hands. And but for ordinary people, they don't get any benefits. So that's the essence.
Right. Well, and I know one of the things with all this globalization that we're seeing is what happens is that we go further and further away from the basic concept of American constitutional republican government, is that rights emanate from God to the individual to local leadership, from local leadership to state, and then on at the bottom of the heap is the national or the federal government. And all these programs, these globalization programs, these regionalization programs that are being promoted are the exact opposite. They are very much top down. most of the regional governments that they're talking about are appointed and not actually elected governments. And so all these Trojan horse things that globalization is bringing into our country are things that will destroy what is so special about America. And you've certainly seen that firsthand in communist China, because that's the way they people. It's always from the top down, and from the bottom up is the thing they're trying to destroy.
Yeah, that's right. Actually, if you look at the situation in China, China is like the bottom of the human society. It's like hell. But those left-wing elements, those people, they want to bring America into that place as well. So they want to take the freedom away from people. So that's the long process, but they have been doing this for decades. So they have succeeded in a lot of areas. So that's very dangerous for us to see, because even if I compare, these days to 1991 when I came here, there's a lot of difference. People's notions are different. People don't care about the personal freedom that much in general. They care about their so-called freedom to use drugs, to have all these sexual relations with anybody they want. All those kind of we see this as a kind of corruption of people's morality, because you have to hold up your moral to be a good person, to maintain the family relation, to maintain the stability of the society and prosperity as well. So that's morality is really the essence of the society. But we have seen this corruption in people's morality in the last 2 decades in this country as well. So that's what we have been seeing. And as I said, the communism, they want to bring down people's corruption. They want to disrupt people's connection to God and to their faith, to family, and so they can, as I said, take the individual freedoms away from people, because once people's morality is down, then they don't have a sense of right or wrong. They go with their flow. So that's what they are doing. Right,
exactly. I've seen that happen a lot in our own country, and it's the result of breaking away from our Christian roots, our background. The moral fiber of our country is being eaten away, just like it was under communism, or is under communism. We're going to be moving into a break here real shortly. What I'd like to do when we come back from the other side of the break, Dr. Lee, is talk a little bit about Falun Gong and what that religious movement is. It's not really religious. I guess you'd call it spiritual movement. What that is and why that is such a threat to the Chinese government. You touched on it a little bit because it's based in a more moral fiber than anything else, and it's very, very, very geared to the individual and to individual freedom. And so when we get back from the break, I'd like for you to talk a little bit more about what that movement is all about.
Okay, I will do that.
All right.
Serving the planet, the micro effect. www.themicroeffect.com.
And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence.
It was 1776 when the founders signed the writ of independence from the Brits. It was revolution. Now an enemy from within would enslave us all again and deprive us of our rights in the Constitution. Restore the Republic. Wake up, it's time to...
Well, welcome back to Connecting the Dots with Dan Happel. today our guest on the radio show is Dr. Charles Lee. Dr. Lee has a really unique perspective of what communism is all about, because he lived under communism and he actually spent 3 years in prison as a political prisoner under torture and survived to tell about it. And that's what we're going to be discussing today on the radio show. Before we get back into that discussion, I just want to remind our listeners to listen to Jeff Bennett's Life, Liberty, and All That Jazz, which is on right after my show, and Debbie's, and throughout the week at 11 a.m. Mountain Time is Jeff Bennett's show, Life, Liberty, and All That Jazz. And tomorrow morning, Debbie Boscalupi's Radioactive Wednesday is going to have a terrific show talking about how the United Nations Agenda 21 is being kind of absorbed into the Humane Society and some of the ranching programs like the Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef and U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Beef are becoming part of our various farming and ranching organizations around the country. And we'll hear firsthand how we need to fight this, because these people are intent on shutting down our system of free enterprise as we know it and destroying farming and ranching in America as we know it. So certainly small farming and ranching. So please join Debbie tomorrow for her Radioactive Wednesday. It'll be a terrific program as always. And also, I ask our listeners, please support this network. Buy our sponsors' products, and please consider contributing money to our enterprise to bring a new satellite link for all of North America on. We're very close to having that project in place. When we do, we'll literally go into the millions of listeners possible through a satellite feed that would cover all of North America. So please consider putting a few dollars into that program. If you do that on a monthly basis, it will really help out with the station and with our network. So anyway, with that, Dr. Lee, we were going to talk Falun Gong and what that movement really means. And I know you talked about it briefly. It's a movement dedicated to truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. And please define exactly what the group is about and why it is such a threat to
Falun Gong actually started in 1992 in China. Then it spread all over the world. But mainly, most of the people who practice Falun Gong is in China because of the language thing. It's started in Chinese, but now we have this all over the world actually. So he talked about the truthfulness, compassion, forbearance. These are the principles we always trying to assimilate ourselves into that, and trying to be a good people, trying to help others. But it's all from individual people. Like everybody looks into himself or herself to get rid of the bad thoughts and bad behavior from our daily life and to become a better person. When you do the meditation, when you don't have any of these bad thoughts, then your mind will be clear, right? So then your mind and body will be in a harmonious state. So in that state, your health will be improved tremendously. So that's how that works. You have to truly cultivate your morality as the base of this practice. So that's why so many people benefit from this program. And it's all based on individual, whoever does it. So that's how that started. And then it was very effective, as I said, in improving people's health and the well-being. And whoever practices that, their family life becomes so much better. And their work also, becomes so much better. So that's why it spread very fast. So and also all the teachings are free. We never charge anybody for learning Falun Gong. Even though it's so good, so beneficial to everybody. There's no charge at all. So that's why it spreads so fast. In terms of the threat to the Communist Party, actually, in essence, we don't have any agenda or any goals in politics or trying to become that kind of thing. So it's actually no threat at all. Actually, it's beneficial to the Communist Party itself, but they don't see that way because they want absolute control of the society. So this is the point, because when you have a group of people who have free thinking, who have their own values in China, the Communist Party feel very uneasy about this. So that's why it's they have seen that as a threat because of this, because we're too good.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you mentioned the fact that it is a worldwide movement. It's not just a localized movement to China. It's actually a worldwide movement, and it is. To me, it kind of reminds me a little bit of kind of a moralistic yoga. I mean, it's concentrating on morality, but it also is to improve your physical health, your mental health. Many things that affect a person's life, and that's kind of the center focus of this whole movement. Is that a pretty accurate statement?
Well, I think that's very close. For yoga, I know the yoga have a lot of very difficult physical movements, like to twist your body and things like that. But Falun Gong is also have some physical movements, and we do meditation. We sit there for a long time with legs crossed. Then when you are able to do that, then you will feel very comfortable. As I said, when you sit there and meditate, then your energy will exchange with the universe. Like you get rid of the bad energy from your body and then get good energy from the universe, like sort of exchange. So it's like you become harmonious with the universe as well. As I said, your mind, your body will be in the harmonious state, but you also have a kind of exchange of energy between you and the universe. So that's how, it's like you are the part of the nature. So that's why, your health can be improved. That's, very good philosophy in terms of improve one's health. So I think, people should look into that because it's really beneficial. It's not like Western medicine and all those things. It's totally different way to look at people's health and how people can live better.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I know you're a medical doctor, and what is your specialty as far as the medical profession? Because I'm sure that weighs in certainly part of it in your strong support for Falun Gong.
Yeah, I studied medicine and passed the board exam, step 1 and step 2 in this country while I was at Harvard Medical School, but I did not have time to get into residency to specialize in my field in medicine. And then the persecution of Falun Gong started. I went back to China several times. I was detained. I escaped, and then I went back again and was arrested and put in prison. So when I got out of the prison, my exam results expired. So I had to retake them if I wanted to become a doctor. So I thought it would take too much time, and I just started business. So that's how it was. So basically, I'm not practicing any medical field or anything like that.
I see. Okay. Well, I know that our listeners would be very interested to hear about your experiences. I know you went back to China a total of 3 times. And the third time, if I'm not mistaken, was the time that you were arrested and thrown in prison. And I think our listeners would really like to hear about what the Chinese political prisoner system is all about and how they treated you in that prison scenario.
I think there's a big difference in terms of the prisoner system in China than any of our other countries. I don't know if anybody know about the Gulag in the former Soviet Union. A lot of political prisoners were thrown in the Gulag, was forced to do slave labor, that kind of things, and then tortured to death. But in China, there's still a even bigger difference because we talk about the communism. They want to cut off people's link to God, right? So they need to brainwash people. So that's what the Communist Party did in China. They wipe out almost all the Chinese traditional culture and the values, that kind of things. They force all people give up their religions. No religions in China. And the only religion survived are those who follow the party lines, which means you have to show your loyalty to the party first. Then you can practice your own religion, that kind of thing. So basically, in essence, there's no religious freedom at all in China because Communist Party is atheist. They don't believe in God. They want to be God's God, Buddha's Buddha. So that's their basic bottom line. Say you cannot really have any free religion or even free thinking. So that's why they wanted to brainwash. So then go back to the prisoner system in China. They have detention centers, they have prisons, and they also have so-called labor camp. The labor camp is like you don't need any trial or anything. The Public Security Bureau can announce that you will be in labor camp for 3 years because your mind is not good. We need to reform your mind, which means you need to be forced to be brainwashed. So in China's prisons, you have to do slave labor. That's one thing because the communists believe that the slave labor, they call it forced labor, can reform your mind, can make you give up all those bad thoughts. That's what they think. They believe. So they force everybody to do slave labor, and they force everybody to do the brainwash sessions. So I was already an American citizen when I was in prison. So they did not treat me so badly as they would do to a Chinese citizen. So because we know a lot of people were tortured to death. When I was in the prison labor camp, I always heard, that people screaming next door because some people were not, were not working hard enough or refused to do something, then they would be beaten up right away. So I heard this screaming all the time. People were tortured, because if they don't do good in the slave labor camp. So that's one of the things. But I myself was forced to go through this brainwashing as well. They would force me to watch those programs against Falun Gong. They have these videos or movies made by the Communist Party blamishing the Falun Gong. They say Falun Gong people are all crazy. They are like a cult or something needs to be wiped out. So I was forced to watch these programs even though I refused to. They have 5 or 6 people holding me up, holding my head, that kind of ways to force me to watch. So it's like, and also they have these kind of sessions all the time. Like they have 10 people or 20 people just surrounding me, yelling at me, all those slogans and call my name and all those things. So it's physical torture and mental torture all the time. So we know that a lot of Falun Gong practitioners were tortured to death in prison or labor camp. And also we know that they even take the organs out from Falun Gong practitioners for the transplantation operations for the recipients. So this is like entire system in China. Like they have hospitals, they have court, they have the policemen, they have even armies involved in this entire system to do this business. So it's very different from the prisons in this country. So I don't know anybody in the audience who have gone through this life in prison, but that's different. It's like you lose your freedom, lose your time in prison, but you also are forced to brainwash. You have to so-called reform your minds according to the Communist Party lines, and that's how it is. Actually, everybody knows that the Communist Party is lying, but they know they are lying to you, and they know they are lying to you, but they're still doing the lying because they want to be the master. Whatever they say, whatever they do, must be right. So that's how it is.
Well, that makes sense. One of the things that we see with communism, and it's been all over the world, certainly in Vietnam after the Vietnam re-education camps, were part of the whole program to get people's minds right so that they would accept communism outright. And if you didn't follow that, then you were going to be re-educated until you did. And there were a number of people like you that ended up, literally spending 3 years or some period of time being re-educated the entire time. I know that there's a lot of Chinese products that are made with, well, they call it slave labor, but a lot of that slave labor is coming out of the prisons. Is that right?
Yeah, actually, that's true because we have a report on this slave labor products. There's tens of thousands of products from China. They are made by the people in prison. But they did this in a way that, you cannot trace down to them. But we still have, a lot of evidence tracing down what they did. But what they commonly practice is to use a ordinary company, then use this company to sort of outsource the work to the prisons. So that's what they do. That they use, on surface they have a company doing this or that, manufacture stuff and then sell stuff. But actually, behind these companies are prisons. So that's how they do that. So if this country want to trace them down, we can, because we have witnesses, who are out of prison who can testify, what they have made and for what kind of company. I myself was forced to make a Homer Simpson slippers, Christmas trees, other shoes and calendars, all those things. But Homer Simpson slippers, you can buy that from Target or online. Those things. It's like I myself is a kind of witness. I can testify. I was forced to make this in prison, but that's how they operate. So a lot of people don't realize how bad the situation in China is, how cheap the labor could be. In terms of prison labor, that's almost nothing. So you cannot compete with this kind of products, and also not just people in this country, all the other countries cannot compete with China for that kind of, labor, like zero, almost zero. So that's how they beat up all the companies in different countries, so they can be the sort of king of manufacturer in the world, so they can occupy a lot of markets by doing that sort of dumping.
Well, it's kind of sad that American companies that sell products, you mentioned the Homer Simpson slippers, sell products, and I don't know if the American companies have any idea that where this labor is coming from, because, as you say, they use an intermediary to act as a a wholesaler or whatever, to get these products from the prisons to the companies. But at the same time, Americans need to realize that this is pretty prevalent in China, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a very common practice in China. People all know that. But when you talk about the trade issue, this is like things people don't realize. In this country, first of all, these products are like very cheap, and it's very competitive in terms of market competition. And second of all, it's full of blood and sweat of people who are suffering in China. I mean, it's very suffocating. If you think about how people live in China, and it will drive out all these companies in this country as well. In the long run, if you don't do anything. So luckily, we have this kind of trade dispute with China. The Trump is raising the tax on these products from China, which helps, because we bring the manufacturing into this country, back into this country. So, but people need to really realize, even if you pay a little more for a product from this country or other countries, it will help a lot, not only to the economy in this country, but also to the world, because the communists, they can do anything to get their goals. So this is one of those big issues we need to pay attention to.
Well, I know that average Americans just don't realize what an impact their purchasing power has on things like this, and I think it's time for Americans to wake up to the reality that we've got to quit supporting these kind of programs, and the best way to do that is with our pocketbooks. And I'm really pleased that President Trump is trying to bring manufacturing and the industry back to the United States, because the globalists have been pushing our industry and our infrastructure offshore for the last 30 years, and the primary recipient of that has been communist China.
Yes, actually, it's kind of sad story, but also kind of funny story, because if you look at the history in the last 20 years, the Communist Party in China, they got so much money. It's unbelievable. They don't even realize, they don't even know how to spend the money well. So they give a lot of money to Venezuela or those people, those countries in Africa, all those things. But ordinary people in China suffers a lot. So you see a lot of people from China, they have a lot of cash to buy house and all those luxury goods. But those people, if you look at the entire population, it's 1.4 billion people in China. Those people who make money is only a very few of them. It's like 5% or something. Most people suffer. They cannot afford to go to hospitals. Many people, they bankrupt when they have a disease. So it's the same. But let's go back to the how this world functions in a way. It's so funny, because people go to China to invest money, to bring money into China, make the Communist Party rich. In the meantime, they bring down America or European countries. If you look at the economy in European countries, they're all suffering as well because of this Chinese competition. And then Chinese Communist Party, they went to all over the world to force people to follow their party lines. The recent case we have seen is that they forced all these airlines from other countries to change their names for Taiwan, because they used to say like Taipei, the airport in Taipei, right? So there's just Taiwan Airport, Taipei. But they force everybody to say Taipei, China. Say like it has to be under the People's Republic of China. So most of those airlines follow the party line, but there are still a few resisted. So that's, and the White House had an announcement that say this is the practice of Orwellian style, like nonsense. It's Communist Party. They want to control the world. That's how it is. Actually, there are so many cases, so widespread, like Communist Party in China. They force all these Western people to be like submit to them, to be dominated by them. So that's happening now. We see them like all over the world to force people to do this and that because they have money in their hands. If you want a Chinese market, you have to follow them. Then we recently see Apple. Apple handed the iCloud control to the Communist Party in China. So on surface, they say only those people use iCloud in China, or if you hit the regions as in China, then your iCloud will be controlled by the Communist Party. But we don't feel safe at all because Apple actually compromised this security with Communist Party. So a lot of companies, they want to make money, they want a Communist Party, they want a market in China, they just follow the Communist Party's orders. So that's the very troublesome, very troubling issue. We're seeing this right now. So we need to realize this is very dangerous because the Communist Party, they have the ultimate goal to really control the world and destroy the human society and want everybody living in the way they want to. So I believe that's the biggest danger we are facing right now, because you see these communist elements in the Western countries. They cooperate with the Communist Party in China, and the Communist Party in China they go all over the world to force everybody else to follow the Communist Party line. That's what's happening. So I mean, this is like a war, like determine the future of human beings. We need to really firm up ourselves, and then work together with people like Trump, and really resist the Communist Party's invasion in all different fields.
Right, I agree, and I know one of the things that comes out of all this money that's flowing all over the world through the Communist Party of China is buying up a lot of natural resources in areas like Africa, in the Middle East, in South America. And as you say, there's always a string attached to all that stuff, and that is a promotion of the communist system. And as a result of that, we see an awful lot of Africa and South America and other parts of the world tilting towards communism. Dr. Lee, we'll be back on the other side of the break. I'd like to continue this discussion, and I'd like to talk about the organ transplant, that scandal that's part of the political prisoner system as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Serving the planet. The Micro Effect. www.themicroeffect.com.
You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
There was a mighty nation, blessed above all of creation. It was a rare and precious pearl, conceived in faith and liberty, home of the brave, land of the free. It was the envy of the world. But this shining city on a hill has turned from the Creator's will and let evil take control. Now the reckless men who lead them want to strip away their freedom and to steal their very soul. Now it's smoke and mirrors, switching bait, criticize and confiscate and let the guilty walk away. In this once righteous, godly nation, in the halls of education, they forbid a child to pray. They say we need to spread the wealth. They pretend to guard the health of the feeble and the poor, while the hand they hold behind their back confuses and conceals the fact that the wolf is at the door. There's an unseen hand that pulls the string.
Well, welcome back to Connecting the Dots with Dan Happel. Today our guest is Dr. Charles Lee, and Dr. Lee has an absolutely amazing story. And one reason I was so excited about getting him on the program is that he has lived under communism. He knows just exactly how bad the system is. And he is someone who really cherishes what freedoms we have in the United States. And I know, Dr. Lee, that you've seen some of the things that have changed over the last, say, 15 years since you came here, because you have seen the advent of all these different programs that are designed to take away our liberties, to take away our freedom. And I'd like to get into the organ harvesting aspect of the political prisoners in the Falun Gong in China and how really what a horrible program that is, and how that really is something that exists in China, and the Communist Party is the one that's making that program happen. Would you tell maybe our listeners a little bit more about what actually has been transpiring in China in that regard? Dr. Lee, are you on the call? It sounds like maybe...
Hello? Yeah, can you hear me?
There we
right
go.
now?
Okay, good.
I'm so
I
sorry,
thought maybe you had dropped off. Anyway, we were talking about the organ harvesting aspect of the prison system and the Falun Gong, and I would like for you to maybe tell our listeners a little bit about how that program has functioned in China.
Yeah, before I talk about that, I want to just bring back the audience to the non-commentaries on Communist Party. This book can be read on the website. It's just the website is called ninecommentaries.com. Nine is like the word nine, ninecommentaries.com. It has all these inherited traits of Communist Party of their true nature. When you look at the history of the Communist Party, then you must realize that the Communist Party don't have any human nature in itself. So we know they have been some big famines in former communist countries like Russia, former Soviet Union, and other countries. But in China, there's a big famine in 1959 to 1961. More than 40 million people starved to death. But the Communist Party called that 3 years of natural disaster. Actually, the weather was very nice in that 3 years. But this famine were all man-made by the Communist Party itself, and they forced people to give up all their food in their house, and they forbid people going out to beg to survive. So that's how it is. So they don't have any human nature, they don't have any bottom line. That's what I want people to really look into that, because if we fall into the communist hand in this country, then you will be very similar. You don't have any freedom, then you don't have security of your life and anything like that. For the organ harvesting, a lot of people just couldn't believe in that, because they take people's organs out when they are alive. So that way they can achieve a lot of purpose. When I mentioned the big famine, right? So the Communist Party not only starved a lot of people to death, they also knocked down people's backbones, because when you are starving to death, then you would listen to them. You would do whatever they ask you to do, even if it's a very shameful thing. So that's why, the Communist Party, they have a lot of ways to really reform your mind, to make you become a non-human being. That's how they worked. So in the case of the organ harvesting, we don't see any humanity in it at all. It never happened in this world before, like taking the organs out from live people, so they can one, torture this person, second kill this person, and then they can make money. They reached a lot of purpose on this way. So this thing was revealed in March of 2006. Two people from China. One is a nurse, another one is a journalist. They came out. They say, they heard this story from the Communist Party inner circle, and also the nurse. She said her husband was a surgeon. He has done more than 2,000 cases of taking the corneas out from the Falun Gong practitioners. So they revealed that there is a hospital in northeast of China. There were 6,000 Falun Gong practitioners were locked in the basement of the camp, the sort of concentration camp, just waiting to be killed for the organs. Then there was a long time of investigation from different people, different groups. People call into the hospitals in China. They have like ad on the website. Say they have like organs available in 2 weeks. You know, in this country, if you want to transplant get a liver or a kidney, you need to wait like 3 years or something like that. You wait in line for somebody die or something, then you can get from a donor get an organ. But in China, you only need to wait for 2 weeks, which means there's a lot of people like a sort of donor pool. You know, it'll be like people will be donating the organs or so-called donating at any time you want. So then you call to those hospitals, those doctors, say, we do have Falun Gong practitioners available, for organs, all those things. And then we collect a lot of evidence. We find out there are more than 850 hospitals in China who, which are doing these transplant operations, and many of them, they're doing huge operations every year. One of the cases in Tianjin, inside China, they have 500 beds for these transplantation operations. They estimate their operation number is like 8,000 operations per year. So that's so many hospitals, people that's so many operations. It's five operations in this country in the United States. China has become number one field, and so it's very hard. We know some people who might have survived Harvard for different reasons. Hello.
Yes, Charles, we're going to have to ask you to please hang up and try to call back. We are having a very bad connection for some reason. So if you would, please, we'll go ahead and go to a short break here and just hang up and call back, please. Thank you.
If you're 85 or younger, would you like peace of mind and comfort for your family? We're Final Expense Direct with an urgent message for you. The average funeral today costs over $8,000, but the most you'll get from government benefits is $255. How will your family pay the difference? We can help. Our senior plans start as low as just $1 a day and pay up to $30,000 for a funeral and other final expenses. Peace of mind is easy.
Okay, we're back, and Charles, sorry, but something happened with your connection, and we were getting a tremendous amount of reverberation, and the sound just completely went bad. Go ahead and finish your thoughts. You were talking about the organ harvesting program, and about halfway through, we started to get this resonance in the background. So go ahead and finish your thoughts, if you would.
Yeah. We have collected a lot of evidence. Like we find like more than 850 hospitals in China doing this transplantation, and also we have some people who might have survived, because usually when they kill some people, like nobody can survive, but some people went through some situations. They escaped. They might be able to sort of demonstrate the organ harvesting things in China. And also we have been calling the investigators, calling the doctors and the hospitals in China. They all say that Falun Gong practitioners have been used for those donors. So that's the situation. And this thing is still like not being widely recognized by the society. And most people have difficulty really believing this, because, as I said, this never happened in human history. Never happened taking organs out from alive people and for selling in the market. So it's tremendous amount. As I mentioned, that there's a hospital in Tianjin, China. There's a Tianjin Central Hospital. They have 500 beds just for these transplantation operations, and they have like 8,000 operations per year. So if you look at the hospitals, many big hospitals like that, you're doing this such an amount, like 2,000 or 3,000 or 5,000 operations a year. Even those hospitals like not really specialized, or they're also doing these transplantation operations, and it's still going on in China. So it's the thing we need to really pay attention to, and also I think the most important thing for people to realize is that the Communist Party has never changed. They're still like sort of like they're still like doing the evil things as we have seen in the last 100-something years. So when you know that this organ harvesting by force still happening in China, then you should give up all any illusions on Communist Party in China and really take a serious look into this situation and then find out what we can do.
Yeah, I'm certainly a big believer in the fact that the communist system is so corrupt that it'll do just about anything for power and money. And you certainly have explained that. One of the things that that comes out of the fact that the communist government there has so much control over industry and is so afloat in money is that they're using a lot of that money to promote their military. They're using a lot of that money to do things that buying natural resources all over the world, things like that, because they fully intend to be the big dog on the block of the really of the 21st century. And they fully intend to overtake and literally control the United States. And they intend to do it through the economy and through their control of all the different natural resources around the world. You've studied that. You really understand that. Can you maybe fill our listeners in on some of the things that they are doing right now, literally all over the world, to make the People's Republic of China the number one power in the world of the 21st century?
They intend to do that. There's a lot of ways for them to do that. One example is they call that one road, one belt. There was a port in Sri Lanka. That's actually they approached the government in Sri Lanka. They want to build a port over there because for them that's kind of strategic location. And the Sri Lanka government felt like it doesn't have that much business, so they were hesitating. They don't see any necessity to build a port over there because they couldn't make money, right? So the Chinese government ordered those Chinese ships, go into the Sri Lanka port, say we need a service. They have like thousands of ships going through all the time. So then the government was sort of the local government was convinced that there would be business, right? So they agreed to the Communist Party from China. Say, okay, we agree to build a port by the Communist Party. Then the Communist Party will bring the labor materials from China and build the port. And then after the port was built, there was no ship at all. It's kind of all tricks, by the Communist Party. So according to the agreement, the local government has to pay back the loans from the Chinese government. They couldn't because there's no business. So they took over the port for 99 years. Like the port is totally controlled by the Communist Party right now from China. So that's how they treat people. In the foreign relations, they all use this kind of things to control local economy, all those wells and natural resource, things like that. Similar things happen in Africa as well. So they have a lot of, as I said, you have 9 inherited traits in the Chinese Communist Party. One of them is deceiving. They want to deceive all the time. It's like from the very beginning they want to deceive you. So if you really treat them as ordinary people, that's a big, huge mistake. So they do have this inspiration or kind of ambition to become the master of the world. And as I mentioned earlier in this program, that they have all people from different countries helping them, like George Marshall, back in 1947, helped the Communist Party. There's still a lot of people helping them, get the money, get the resource, and get the position they want. So that's the thing they are doing. And in the last 20 years, they have accumulated a lot of money for them to spend to achieve their goal in this area. So it is a situation we need to really, have a clear mind about this.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned George Marshall, and it's funny, but the history, well, it isn't funny at all, it's tragic, but the history of China, where George Marshall actually allowed Mao Zedong to have the Japanese war material. He actually literally handed it over to him. And then at the same time, the people in the United States in Congress and General Marshall were making it very difficult for Chiang Kai-shek. They literally cut off the funding that would provide his military and the military goods that would provide his military the ability to battle off the communists. And I never could understand that, but that is very definitely something that happened. And, that's been happening now for a very long time, those same kind of circumstances where people in power in the United States are doing things to promote communism around the world.
Yeah, that's a very sad fact, actually, that happened in the history. That's still happening right now, because in that 9 inherited traits in the Communist Party, one of them is espionage. So, back in before the World War II, there were already very heavy infiltration from the former Soviet Union in this country as well. There was a guy who actually helped to write the charters of the United Nations, Higgins, that guy, Hiss, Hiss, I think. That guy actually is a communist spy. Uh-huh. So when the State Department of this country was really heavily infiltrated by the Communist Party, so they have these people in United States promoting the communist ideas. They are sort of fanfare with communism, so they really support. If you look at the history, in the former Soviet Union, there were about 330 in the first, the first communist government in former Soviet Union, 330 committee members, the communist central committee, sort of organization like that. 200, there were 260 of them were from the United States. That was kind of funny story, but it's the real fact. The Communist Party, they got a lot of support from this country. That's the thing. So it's sort of people. There are a lot of people in this country. They still have this kind of romantic feeling about the communism, and some people are even promoting socialism openly, Sanders, right? They want people believe in the goodness of so-called socialism or communism, but actually this is totally a lie. There's nothing good about this communism at all. So, but they do have these people infiltrating this the government of the United States and all different fields. So they supported the Communist Party in China and helped them to get into power. So that was the history. And as I mentioned, in the 70s, the Nixon and Kissinger, they went to China for help. And Kissinger still go to China a lot, actually. Mm-hmm. A funny story, yeah. But for Kissinger, there was a guy, Bo Xilai, was brought down by Xi Jinping Bolshevik was in Chongqing City. They had this kind of singing, the sort of celebration of singing the red songs. Kissinger even joined those people like to sing the red songs, like the communist songs. That's what he did.
Yes, and you had mentioned Dr. Lee Alger Hiss, the lead architect of the Dumbarton Oaks Conference that drafted the UN Charter, or the framework for the UN. And Alger Hiss was convicted of perjury for his part in Soviet espionage activities while serving in the State Department. He ended up being the first Secretary General of the United Nations. I think people need to realize that the United Nations is very much a communist organization. It always has been. They call it the Dictators Club, and probably the best thing we could do is get ourselves as far away from that organization as we possibly can.
Yeah, we heard this news, like the United States has this intention to withdraw from United Nations. So that's what happened in history. So United Nations itself is not a really like a free world organization. It's like controlled by the communism. So that's how it is. And we see like in the last at least 19 years, the United Nations did not stand up for the persecution against the persecution in China on Falun Gong. So they did not have any like very clear voice on this kind of issues. So they have human rights commission, that kind of organization in United Nations, but they never did anything right because it's controlled by the Communist Party in China.
Yeah, that's apparent. Well, what I'd like to, and we're going to be moving into a break here real shortly, but what I'd like to talk about is your organization and what you're trying to do. You mentioned your book, and it has the 9 commentaries on communism, and I'd like to mention that. I'd like to get back into that and some of the programs that you're working on to awaken the world's people, not just the American people, but the world's people, to really how insidious and how evil communism is, and try to talk people in China into digging a little deeper and extracting themselves from the Communist Party of China. So as soon as we get back from the break, I'd like to get into that discussion.
Serving the planet. The Micro Effect. www.themicroeffect.com.
Well, welcome back to Connecting the Dots with Sam Hammond. And we've got a terrific guest on our show. The last recording is a perfect segue into what we're going to be talking about. But one of the things that it has always amazed me is how the radical Marxist groups like Students for a Democratic Society and the Weathermen and all these groups that were so rabid and so active in the 1960s all became part of the Green Movement and became part of the sustainability movement, the radical environmental movement that now has the world by the throat. And it never ceases to amaze me that those same green groups that came from communism are doing everything possible to shut down clean coal-fired generators in the United States, to remove dams, and actively attack farming and ranching in our country in ways that would have been unimaginable 30 or 40 years ago. And yet, at the same time, countries like Communist China and India and Indonesia and Brazil, countries that are polluting the atmosphere in ways that are just way beyond anything that America ever did in their worst days. And yet they're attacking us, and they're not attacking those communist or those socialist countries. There's a reason for that. It's because they want to destroy our industrial base. They want to destroy Western Europe's industrial base, and they want to move their resources into the communist countries. It's never been about the environment. It's always been about redistribution of wealth. Dr. Lee, I know you've watched this process go on in the United States and around the world. Tell our listeners what your perspective is about the so-called green movement and why they're so quiet when it comes to some of the worst polluters in the world.
Yeah, I believe that, you guys have been talking a lot about these all different movements, all different movements, green movements and other sort of movements. Behind that, there are a lot of communist infiltration. The purpose of this is to control people, to take the freedom away. You mentioned about the Twitter movement, quitting the Communist Party. I will go back to the movements later on. For this kind of environmental movements, and you also have like the Black Lives Matter, that kind of movements. All these things, it's totally the purpose behind that is to demolish or destroy the existing system, capitalism system, to destroy people's access to the free market and all those things. So they can control your business. They can control, take away the freedom. I don't know if maybe you guys already noticed that there's a movement in this country. It's called a walk away from Democratic Party. I'm not saying the Democratic Party itself is a communist party, but there are a lot of things in there. It's very similar to communism practices. So in China, there is a movement of quitting the Communist Party, which started right after the publication of that book, 9 Commentaries on Communist Party. And in end of 2004, and up to these days, we have 309 million people, actually more than 309 million people in China who have announced that they're not a part of communism. They have quit. Their members from the Communist Party, Communist Youth League, and the Communist Young Pioneer. That's 3 different organizations. Most Chinese people would have to be a part of it if you really want to have a so-called life in China. If you are not part of it, you will be like discriminated against, even worse. Even though a lot of people are like suffering under the communists. So that's the 3 organizations. We have right now, like every day, there's like 80 to 100,000 people announce that they quit. So that this movement actually is not really a political movement in the sense that there's no organizations, like people who announce they quit. After they quit, they don't have any ways to organize among these people. So it's for the people's conscience, for people's morality. People are awakening. They don't want to be a part of the communist system. They don't want to be a part of the communism. So this movement will finally disintegrate the Communist Party itself. It's weakening the Communist Party from within. And also it's peaceful. And the Communist Party doesn't have any way to control it because, every individual announced. Sometimes they use their real name. Sometimes they use their the pen name, that kind of things. So it's a movement really can clear up people's conscience, and then they realize how bad, how evil the communism system has been. So that movement has been influencing China and the world in a big way because we know that Communist Party in China has a lot of crises. Even though they have a lot of money, but the economy is in a big mess, because Communist Party itself doesn't know how to manage economy. They always have these ways of controlling people to use other people's wisdom or intelligence to develop economy. So they don't know how to manage that. So the economy in China is really in a bad shape in terms of the economic structure, and they don't know how to turn around because they always put the money in the housing market, in the infrastructure, that kind of thing. They don't have any heart to develop their technology. So that's why when you see this dispute between the United States and China, then China's economy doesn't really have any ways to resist this kind of trade war. So, but anyways, back to this movement. That's has been like for more than 13 years already. So it's become bigger and bigger. Like every 3 years, every year there's like more than 30 million people who quit communism. So every 3 years it's like 100 million people. So that's how fast it develops. It's about like the whole population in this country, the number of the people who quit the communism in China. So that's the thing. And also I believe this movement can give a lot of help to this country because as we discussed, the Communist Party has been infiltrating all over the world. But since it's been weakened within the Communist Party itself, so that damage it has been doing to other countries will be less and less. And also it gives people kind of inspiration, say like you have to return to the tradition, return to the morality before these communists can be like wiped out. So this is like a process in action right now. People are quitting, people are awakening, and I believe that as I mentioned, the walk away movement in this country is kind of similar. People have realized what the Democratic Party has been doing in different ways. So they say, I don't want to be part of it. We walk away. So that's the thing. We are very encouraged in that kind of field.
Yes, and a matter of fact, I've seen also the progressive Republicans, and I think we've noticed that it isn't just the Democratic Party; it's also a certain segment of the Republican Party that have moved. They call themselves progressives, but in fact they're socialists or worse, and they've moved themselves from being the mainstream. They've moved themselves to the fringe, and I think people are starting to realize what those people are all about. And frankly, I think that's why President Trump was elected, and I think that's why the whole idea of a populist president has really knocked the skids out from under the deep state.
Yes, that's this system. It should be in both parties, like in this country. So I think the most important thing is to let people know the truth, what they have been doing. Then people can make a decision themselves.
Yeah, that's right. I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the programs that you're promoting right now and how people can learn more about what you're doing and help maybe to participate in that enlightenment of the Chinese people as well as the rest of the world. I know you've got this book that you were talking about. If you'd maybe tell our listeners a little bit more about that, and then also about the program that you're running to try to get people to bail out of the Communist Party of China.
Yeah, I think this is maybe the biggest grassroots movement ever in human history. We talk about the scale. It has like more than 300 million people who have announced, and there are still like about 80, 90, or 100,000 people every day who are announcing that they're not part of the Communist Party anymore. So this movement actually, we have service center in New York City, and also we have a lot of people around the globe. They have stationed in different places, like tourist centers, that kind of places. When people from China go to these places, they would advise people, say that you should realize what's happening, and you should not be a part of the Communist Party or other organizations. Then a lot of people say, okay, I realize that's true, and I want to announce that I'm not going to be part of the Communist Party, things like that. So this is like a grassroots movement that is very powerful and really can change the society a lot. And we believe that's real hope for China, and also a hope for the world, because as we have been discussing, that the communist infiltration in the world is very heavy, and they are bringing down the entire human society because they're cutting the connection of people to God, and they bring down people's morality. So it's really something that everybody should face to. That it's affecting everybody, our family members as well, and our next generations and the generations after the next. So it's the movement. It's really inspiring and very exciting, because it's peaceful. We're not like launch a war or something, by violence. We just want people's moral to be awakened. So this is like there is really the attacking the root of this issue. So you can really solve the problem by revealing the truth and tell everybody the truth, what's happening, then people can make a decision. And for those people who know the truth, and if they have conscience, they will choose the right path. That's exactly what we are working on. Like, we have to tell people the truth, and we have to let people choose for their own path. So that's what this movement is about. And I believe that this can happen in this country. As I mentioned, that this so-called walkaway is very similar in the way that people know the truth, and they will decide which way to go. Many people say, I'm not going to be part of it. Then those communist elements in this country will be weakened in this way. So
well, I see these things happening in the United States that you're talking about, and I see things like, you're talking about the walkaway movement. That we see it a lot where people are starting to talk about things that they 10 years ago they would have talked were conspiracy theories, and that is things like the swamp in Washington, D.C., the deep state, all the different programs that are really designed to strip away our freedoms. And your comment about morality being at the very center of that is spot on, because in these programs, they always want to eliminate any sense of morality, any sense of religion, any sense that the government or some all-seeing eye is not who ultimately controls everything, and that we have a moral and intellectual and spiritual and physical responsibility to make our world a better place. And that's something that I wanted to ask you about, is the next generation of Chinese. They seem to be really, really independent, and they are really trying to move in that direction. Am I taking that the right way?
I believe so, because for those people, for these young kids in China, actually, it's kind of sad, because when they were born in the communist country. They were brainwashed from the time of life, the beginning of life. So it's difficult for people really to realize the truth, but they still, so many people so many volunteers to tell them the truth, even though they are risking their own lives. I'm talking about those volunteers in China, but they still are doing this. So that's the hope, because, as long as people have a little conscience in themselves, then there's a hope. So we tell them the truth. Then, I believe the next generations, like the young kids, they are like very much the victims of this communist brainwash. And also in this country, if you look at the young kids, the students, since this education system has already been infiltrated by the communists in this country, so a lot of young kids, they are very sympathetic to these socialism things, like Bernie Sanders has been talking about, like socialism. Everybody, like gets the same welfare benefits, but they don't talk about the contribution. You should work hard, to contribute your wisdom, your intelligence, your labor, and those things. So that's the trend. But as I said, as long as people still have conscience in themselves, then we still have hope. So the essence is to reveal the truth.
Well, and that's a good way to look at all of it. But one of the things that come from what you're talking about with the morality and the new focus is that communism has always taught that morality and let's say spirituality or anything like that is really off the table. They teach regimen, they teach obeying orders, they teach working as the collective, and they teach things that are really the opposite of what human nature wants to be, and that is we all want to be responsible ultimately for our own wiki-up. We want to be in control of our own lives, and some people have gotten used to the idea that somebody else is going to make the decisions and pull all the strings, and they just go along. But there's still an awful lot of people in this world, and I'm sure China's very much this way, that they just want to live their own lives and be left alone.
Yeah, I think for the communism, they have always been, as I said, trying to deceive people. So when they lay out this kind of so-called future, like the communist society in the future, these are all lies, because when you really get into that, then you lose your freedom. Because we have seen in the history, a lot of people, they devoted their lives, they devoted their passion to the communism, but they ended up like being killed, being in prison, all those things. It happens so much in China. So for people in this country, they don't see that because they haven't gone through that yet, even though, like the trend is towards that direction, but they still haven't seen what happened in China. The Communist Party in China, they have given people a lot of so-called hope, when they trying to use you to get their own things, like get the power in China. They have incited a lot of young kids, to support them. And then these kids, many of them are intellectuals. They stayed with China Communist Party after they took power. Then almost all of them, like being like sort of persecuted, and many of them being killed and put into prison. So it's how it is, because Communist Party, they never tell you the truth. Whatever good stuff they want to tell you, they're always trying to convince you to follow them. So that's their trickery. That's it's always been like this. And they never tell the truth. It's actually, if you talk about the communists, if you track down the root of the communism, it's sort of evil. Satanism. It's sort of like they worship the Satan. They worship the Satan, to bring down human beings to hell. So that's the essence of the communism. But a lot of people don't really know that, because they try to cover up this all the time, and the ordinary people don't see media or any news outlet talking about this. The root of the communism. Actually, they are from the Satanism. Karl Marx himself was worship of Satan. So it's from the very beginning, it's not a good stuff. So even though you can see a lot of people believe in communism, they are very sort of romanticizing the communism. Actually, they do not see the essence. So that's why I think the more truth you reveal, the better for people to realize the evilness of the communism.
Yeah, I think communism is about control. It always has been, and that's something that your group is really trying to let people know exactly how controlling this whole process is. Dr. Lee, I just want to give you a minute or two to kind of wrap up and tell our listeners how they can support you and how they can learn more about your group, and then what your final thoughts would be to our listeners.
Yes, I think this communist stuff is the biggest danger to the entire human society, because it not only controls China right now, North Korea, and but it controls almost all the countries in the world. Because if you really look into that, almost everywhere has been infiltrated by the communism. So we need to really learn the truth, what the communists really about. And as I said, there's a book, Nine Commentaries on Communist Party. The website is ninecommentaries.com. You can look at the website and read the book, and then get to know communism. And also, if you really read the book, you will understand a lot of things happen in this country. They also controlled by the communist elements. So if you look at the book, then you will realize the nine inherited traits of the Communist Party. Then you can use that as sort of standard to see what they're doing in this country, in the left-wing groups. All these methods they're using are very similar to the Communist Party in China. So it's the way to learn, and it's the way to really have the truth in your mind. And then people wake up, then resist the infiltration from the Communist Party in China, and also resist the infiltration by the communist elements in this country. So that's the hope of the entire human being. So we need to really be alert. So this is what's happening. Then we need to take actions, to reveal the truth, spread the truth.
Well, I think that's a terrific message for our listeners. I have to say that I really appreciated you being at the Red Pill Expo. You were a tremendous voice there, and your message is exactly what the whole Red Pill experience is all about, and that is seeing through all the lies and what's been going on in this country right now with Common Core and a number of these other programs is really a view of what our world will be if we allow this to continue. What you experienced in China will be what we experience here in the United States.
That's right. Thank you very much, Ms. Apple.
Well, thank you. And I want to also let our listeners know, please tune in tomorrow at the same time for Debbie Boscalupi's Radioactive Wednesday, and she'll be having a great program on connecting the dots between the sustainability movement and also the farming and ranching communities, and how so many of these groups are being sucked in to a program that's really antithetical to the American farming way of life. So please join her tomorrow, and thank our listeners for tuning in for Dr. Lee's comments. Remember one thing, we are living in the freest country in the world. It has changed a bunch in the last 20 or 30 years. It's changed tremendously in the last 20 or 30 years. But it's so important that we stand up and be counted, and that we stand up for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that means our constitutional republic. So anyway, please join us again next week. And thank our listeners. And
Thank you and goodbye.
all right, thank you, Dr. Lee.
Thank you, Ms. Heppel. Okay, bye-bye.